Hey, it's Kim, and welcome back to Pokemon Breaks. Today we have another Starting Your Collection video, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk about card grading. This is something that's really new to me. This will be my first ever grading submission, so I'm going to share the background research that I've done and what I'm learning along the way. I hope that it's helpful for you. If card grading is something that you're a seasoned veteran at and you have tips and tricks that you want to share with me and others, please leave them in the comments down below. I'm sure it will be super helpful. If you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe. It helps more than you realize, and leave the video a like if you enjoyed it. Today, I'm partnered with TCG Trading Card Grading, which is an Australian-owned and run grading business. They reached out to me and were happy to do this collaboration, which I really appreciate, and I'm always happy to support other Aussies. TCG Grading has the benefit of being a specialist in Pokemon and Dragon Ball Super. Pokemon is obviously what I collect, so I'm really chuffed to be able to work with someone that has that special interest at heart. The other things that I really like about TCG would be their beautiful slabs. I think they're really simplistic and they don't detract from the Pokemon artwork. And they also are starting to do art cards. So they've graded the art cards that I've sent in, and they look absolutely fabulous in their beautiful slabs. It's really awesome to see my artwork encapsulated and protected in that way. So I'm really honored that they were happy to work with me on that project as well. One of the big questions that I had when I started collecting Pokemon cards more seriously was, why would you go ahead and grade cards? To me personally, I think one of the biggest reasons is around the sentimental value and the attachment that I have to a card and the ability to protect it for the long term. So that is one of the main reasons I'm really choosing to grade some cards. I've got some cards that are very special. I just want to protect them. So I'm really hoping that they come back at a decent grade, but I'm going to be happy with whatever they are because I know they're going to look lovely in these gorgeous slabs. The other thing about grading cards that is an obvious benefit is authentication. So particularly with things like vintage cards or really expensive cards, making sure that they're legitimate is obviously going to be really important whether you're buying or selling. So that does add a lot of value. It's going to protect the card in the long term, and it's going to protect you as a buyer or seller, making sure that you're getting the real deal. The other big reason that people obviously choose to grade their cards is in terms of adding value. So a graded card, particularly if it gets a good grade, can be much more expensive on the open market than an ungraded card. You've got a guarantee that it is a decent copy, it's in good nick, and you've also got that long-term protection. As a buyer or a seller, having that grade is definitely going to be really helpful. I guess one thing to think about if you're wanting to grade cards to add value to sell them, you need to consider how much it costs to have the cards graded and what the turnaround time is like. Any service that you use to grade your cards, there's going to be a cost associated with the grading, but also you're going to have to pay shipping and return shipping, and you're going to have to wait for it. So if you're wanting to grade, for instance, modern cards, their value tends to drop. So as the set immediately comes out, the value is pretty high. The value tends to drop off in that immediate sort of few months. And if you're sending cards off to have them graded and you're waiting for them to come back and you're thinking that you're going to get a huge amount of money, you're probably going to have to rush that, which is going to cost you a bit more. The alternative to that would be looking at grading things like vintage cards, but again, you want to make sure that they're in really good nick. The other thing I would recommend you keep in mind is that more and more people are getting into collecting Pokemon and getting their cards graded. So the more supply there is in the market, the less the relative demand, the lower the relative value is for those cards that you might be sending in. So if you're looking to turn a profit with cards, I would consider really seriously the cost of the grading itself, what's the population of those cards, the overall popularity of the card or the character, and in general, I would say probably more popular, older, rarer, and mintier cards are going to be more worthwhile to send in for grading. If you have a vintage collection that you're wanting to move on or have authenticated, there's not really a rush in having it graded. So any priority or fast grading services are going to cost a little bit more. Using TCG, it's $35 as compared to $25. So you're paying a premium to have things done quickly. And with vintage, that's not really necessary. Your base set Pikachu is going to continue to be base set Pikachu, whether it's graded in 2 months or 1 month or 2 weeks. In getting ready to submit my cards for grading, I wanted to learn a lot more about how grading services actually look at cards. So I've done some reading about a number of different services. A lot of them use really similar scales. So I'll talk you through some of the things that I've learned. The grading services tend to use a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being obviously quite a heavily damaged card and 10 being gem mint. The difference in value between a 9 and a 10 is astronomical in terms of sales for a lot of cards, but to the naked eye, might not be particularly different at all. It's really up to you and what you're looking for as a collector and what's important to you as to what kind of grades you might be chasing as a buyer and how you might feel about getting a 9 as opposed to a 10. Grading services tend to use 4 key criteria when they're grading cards. The first would be centering. So that's looking at the border around the outside edge of the card and making sure that it's even from top to bottom and left to right, and that's on both front and back of the card. Cards that are well centered are definitely going to be more pleasing to the eye, and usually you lose points when it's off by more than 5 to 10%. Surface tends to be the next criteria that grading card companies will look at, and that's looking at any minor scratches, printing or manufacturing errors, stains, sunspots, or fading on the surface of the card on the front and the back. With vintage cards, for example, what you often find is that the hollow boxes are scratched, whether it's from being in sleeves or being played, and that's obviously going to decrease the value to quite a degree. With newer cards, scratching can obviously be an issue, as can manufacturing faults. It can be quite difficult to pull a 10 straight from a pack, even if there's no damage that happens to it at all. The third criteria that grading card companies will look at is the edges. So all around the outside edge of the card. Within the cards, there's obviously a white layer of paper, and then the printing is all on the outside. If there's been damage or manufacturing errors or cutting errors, you're going to see white edges, potentially, all around the sides or maybe just on one side. When you have that whitening around the edges, that's going to detract value from the cards. So looking carefully at the edges of the card is a good way to help prepare your cards for grading and give you an indication of what they might be worth. The final criteria is going to be corners. So obviously Pokemon cards have a nice rounded corner. They should be really uniform. There are a lot of cards that have had cutting errors, and they might have sharp corners, they might have damaged or dinged corners, particularly if they've been played. If you'd like more information on how TCG Grading grades their cards, I'll leave their grading scale in a link below, and you can have a bit of a read for yourself. So now I'm going to show you which cards I'm choosing to send off, and I'll talk a little bit about why I'm choosing to send them. I'm really excited to see what they come back as. The first card I'm sending off is the Full Art Marnie from Shiny Star V. This card has gone up in value a fair bit, and I think this card has a pretty good chance of returning a good grade. From what I can see, it has really clean edges, it's quite symmetrical, there's no damage that I can see. I've had a bit of a look at it with a magnifying glass. I'm really excited to see how this one comes back. I'm not actually planning on selling this card or any of the others that I'm sending off. I mostly just want to protect it for my own collection, but I think this one has a pretty reasonable chance of coming back at least a 9, but that's just my guess. The second card I'll be sending is this gorgeous Lily and Clefairy character art. This is from Dream League, which is one of my absolute favorite sets. I purchased this on eBay, and from what I can see, again, it's a pretty decent copy. There's no damage. I'm hoping this comes back at a 9 or so. The next 3 I have to send off are the base set starters from the Japanese 25th anniversary collection. I have the Charizard. To me, this one looks really good. I don't see any damage, any whitening. It looks well centered on the front and the back. I think this one's got a pretty good chance of coming back at a decent grade. The Blastoise I also think looks really good. It's well centered. I don't see any whitening. The corners look really crispy, so I think this one has a good chance. My Venusaur, on the other hand, edges in particular, I'm not sure how promising this is. My main reason for choosing to send this one with the other two was that I just wanted to have all three in slabs. I'm not really planning on selling them, so I'm super interested to see what they come back as, and I think as a set, they're still going to look really cool on display. I have the Umbreon from the 25th anniversary collection. This is again Japanese from the promo packs. This one to me, again, looks really good. I think the centering is really clean. When I was looking at it initially, it took me a minute to make sure that it was printed straight because there's that darker and lighter segment across the top. It made a little bit of an optical illusion and I wasn't quite sure if it was printed off center, but I think it is pretty straight. It looks pretty centered. It's not damaged, so I'm hoping this one comes back at a 9 or a 10 as well. Obviously, in terms of things like printing faults and centering, I am trusting the Japanese cards a little bit more. Most of my English pulls I haven't had the best luck with, so I'm hoping these ones come back and return a pretty good grade. And the final card I have is the Champion's Path Shiny Charizard V. I've actually pulled 2 copies of this one, and interestingly, one of them is really well centered in my opinion. It looks pretty crisp. I think the edges look really good. The other one, on the other hand, is really top heavy, so I'm pretty sure that one wouldn't come back as such a good grade. I'm hoping this one, though, does come back at a solid sort of 9 or 10 level. It looks pretty good to me, so I'm really excited to see what they come back as. I've looked at all of these cards with a magnifying glass. I personally can't see any scratches or dents on them, but the technology that grading card companies use is obviously going to be a lot more intense and rigorous than what I can do at home. I am really excited to see what they come back as, and I think it's going to be a really good learning experience, and I'm super chuffed to be able to share that with you. Every grading company might be a little bit different. TCG Grading, you just need to fill out all the details online and you pay for your submission. You'll get an order number and then you need to pack up your cards and send them off for grading. Now, depending on what company you decide to use for grading your cards, they will have their own advice on how to pack things up and how to prepare the submission. Using TCG Grading, they have a really good detailed description on their website, so making sure that you have each of your cards in their own individual Ultra Pro sleeve, putting a sticky tab on the outside back of the sleeve to make sure that it's easy for the graders to remove, and then putting each card into its own card saver. So using graded card sleeves rather than top loaders is definitely going to be protective for this service, as the top loaders can damage your cards, particularly in transit and when they're trying to remove them. The website recommends stacking the cards in the order that you prepared them online for the submission, and then writing your order number at the top of the cardboard piece. They've suggested putting the cards in a stack of cardboard and then adding a few rubber bands to make sure that it's secure. And I'm going to wrap everything in bubble wrap, but use some other form of packing material to keep them safe while they're in transit. You need to put your postage details in and then send them off to the PO box. Easy as that. So now that I've got my cards all packed up and ready to go to TCG Grading, we'll get them sent off, and I can't wait to see what they return as. I'm really excited to learn from this opportunity and to share what my cards come back as and to see how they look in the slabs. I think it's going to be really fun. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, and if you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe. It helps more than you realize. Until next time, please look after yourself, and I'll see you soon. Bye!